So we'll go ahead and get started with the City Council Caucus meeting. First item on the agenda tonight is paramedic-only job description. Chief Whitaker, if you'd like to come to the podium, please.
Good evening. Shouldn't take more than 45 minutes. I'll try to cut that down. I think you're all well versed in the fact that I've been talking about the difficulty in fire service recruitment, the list of new applicants. So in thinking of this and how we can kind of become competitive, how we can, compete with the current culture that's going on in the fire service, we'd like to add a job description to our list of job description, and that is paramedic only. This position is not a certified firefighter, and that individual would be stationed and located, staffed on an ambulance at all times. Real quick, the purpose of this is trying to address the number of available applicants. It will be a non-hazardous qualification, and I'll discuss the salary band later. Summary, again, go ahead and go to the next slide, please, and I will kind of explain it. It's self-explanatory when you see. We had a recent posting for firefighter, EMT, firefighter, paramedic. We received 9 applications for 4 openings. Those 9 applications were all firefighter EMTs. We had 0 firefighter medics apply. Fortunately, we did a word-of-mouth hiring notice in which we were able to locate 2 firefighter paramedics. So they are currently in the PD background. But that still leaves us 2 other positions. So our hope is with this, if you guys agree to add this to our list of job descriptions, it will be able to possibly even repost and maybe require somebody to fill that slot. I think you all have heard me talking about going to paramedic schools and talking to the students, trying to recruit. And so many of them are not even in the fire service. So many of them have no desire to be. We could really never do anything with these folks. Next slide, please, Matt. Told you it's going to take 45 minutes, so we're way under time. Qualifies as non-hazardous. There are some other departments in the area, Florence, Edgewood, Alexandria, Ellesmere, and I can't think of the others, but they too have gone to this. So this isn't like a brand new idea. This is something that we're trying to help staff our equipment. So the other departments have done it. They are all qualified as non-hazardous. Now, if that individual would like to become a firefighter and become hazardous and become a firefighter paramedic as opposed to a paramedic only, it's something that we can work on with that individual. The pay band for the firefighter paramedic that's proposed is a probationary their first year. It mirrors the same as a firefighter paramedic. That is band I. Once they get off probation after that 1-year mark, they go into band H, which is, it mirrors again the firefighter paramedic. Now remember, the firefighter paramedics are certified firefighters, so they're receiving $4,000 a year from the state on incentive pay. So there's a discrepancy in the pay. If medic only would not qualify for that. Next, please. EMS, emergency medical service, that's 80% of what we do. It's the importance of, over 3,000 times a year, that ambulance is heading out to our community. So staffing that ambulance is paramount. The employee pool for just firefighter, medic, firefighter EMT alone is getting smaller and smaller. And as people retire, as the job openings advance, and there are more, opportunities elsewhere are numerous. So, there is a competitive culture out there among fire departments. We obviously want to latch the best people. We want to keep them. It is just so thin right now that adding this job description just kind of gives us another tool that we can use to kind of battle the recruitment process. There's nothing saying that okaying this is we have to go down that route, but it sure is a nice thing to have in our back pocket. If, like I said, that young man that I spoke to at Gateway, you know, I don't have any fire hours, but I'm going to graduate a paramedic. That's great. We can use you. You can, you know, we can train you to on the ambulance. We can put you in the field and work with you to become a firefighter. So it just gives us options. So I think what I'm asking tonight that is if, you know, you give the okay, we can go ahead and move forward with it. I see I have questions. Go ahead.
How would this, so is a regular, and this is just an education for me, so would a regular medic be hazardous? Or what differentiates hazardous versus non-hazardous? If you're dealing with like bodily fluid?
IDLH, atmosphere, in a residence, in a structure, that is a large part of it. I tend to agree with you on that, but you know, nobody else is doing that. But I agree with you. But I was willing to just take the non-hazardous at this point. I do think that bodily fluids, needles, they're in a car, they're on the expressway. In my eyes, it is a hazardous. But when you say that, that's another 32% of something that the city has to pay. It's a monetary issue. It's a monetary issue. So I feel strongly about that, but I can't compare it to anyone else because nobody else is paying into the hazardous. Does that explain it, I hope?
Is there such a thing as a contract position?
We do not have that. Yes, sir.
No, Chief, I was just wondering, I know we're going to start up this whole new task force to kind of, you know, just talk about some of these things, some of the larger things, even that you and Mr. Kramer have talked about in the past. And is this something that you feel that we should still do now, or kind of hold off and have that discussion as part of that, you know, that broader scope?
I think it will warrant a discussion further down the line, but honestly, if we implement it now, are you okay now? Just as I had said, it's not something we have to go out and do, but it's there. And I know, you know, if you guys agree upon it and we vote on it at council on the 2nd, the Kentucky board, the commission down there meets on the 10th. And then we meet sporadically. And they need the okay from council. They need the okay from the city. So honestly, I'd like to get it in there, but that's not to say we can't discuss it. I mean, we could make a firefighter janitor job description and throw it in there and never have, but they already told me that they do that already, so that job wouldn't be. But just to have it, I think, in our back pocket right now, I would like to do it now.
So with just one more question real quick, and I know there's the municipal order part of the job description.
Pete, what do you do with these PD guys?
All right. So there's that portion of it, but then there's also us doing the ordinances to do the pay and classification plan, since this is not an itemized line item in that right now. Mm-hmm. Does that impact the reposting of these, since we would be potentially, you know, first reading, second reading December? I mean, how much?
Yeah, it's gonna. Yeah, if we do repost, it would obviously be delayed until everything is okay. So we really wouldn't go down that road. And like I said, fortunately, we filled. Well, we hope we filled 2, if the backgrounds are okay. So the next 2, I mean, say we run a couple months without filling that if there's nobody else in the pipeline. But we have 9 applicants, and I think one of those applicants is in paramedic school. Okay. So we wouldn't be able to do anything like post until it's all squared away.
Yeah, I was just thinking more along the lines of, do we need to be thinking about, you know, special meeting to kind of to run that through a little bit quicker if you've got people on the hook that might end up going to the Florences or the other places that you've just mentioned.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, but to be honest with you, we're already behind the 8 ball, I think. Okay. I think we're already behind.
Gary, we're also limited. The timeline for us is not the important thing, it's the state. So this is still a few months process just to get a new position. So if something would come through where the state approves this a lot quicker, we can always do that. But at this point, it usually takes a few months to get state approval for this. But the first step is to have council approve it.
Well, that's why I was talking with Mr. Bailey, and he had told me that of the meeting on the 10th, because he's been in contact with him about this, and he said, yeah, if you can get the vote. But again, I don't know how that will fully operate. Yes, ma'am.
I have a few questions and comments. I like the idea. Are there fewer people going into paramedic school in general? And I only ask this because I personally know several who, due to COVID and not having in-person classes, said, this isn't really how I wanted to learn how to be a paramedic, was looking at a screen. And I don't know if that's a trend everywhere, but I just know personally, I know people who were considering going into the medical field after college and stepped back and said, maybe this isn't the direction I want to go right now. And I just didn't know if that was a trend across the board.
Not being a spokesman for Gateway, Cincinnati State, or any of these, but I have not seen any classes that have canceled, and the classes that I have met are full. So my gut instincts tells me that there's no, but you understand paramedic, there are nurses that go back to paramedic school. There are people that, I think the Gateway class had maybe having an accountant in there. So I'm really not, they just, you don't know really what you're getting. So I've not seen the decline.
My other comment was, you had mentioned that this is 80% of what you do, and I think I've asked you before about trends with numbers, because I like looking at all the trends and the data of the number of calls that have gone up consistently over the years. And you attribute that to just an aging population. So I don't see that 80% going down. I see it continuing to go up.
Runs are,
so
Chief McQuarrie, what are our runs up over there? He's my number guy. Yeah. So they're going this way and trying to address that. It's difficult, you make that axis, the runs, the duties are going up, and your employee pool is trending the other way. And it's just not, it's almost every profession now. We know that currently with the culture that's going on. But in this field, and I know PD's experienced the same thing, it's just, it was so competitive in the day you were just thrilled to death to land a job, and now you're a paramedic firefighter, you've got the Willy Wonka golden ticket. You get your choice of where you want to go, and it's still hard to find them. Yes, sir.
Chief, for the sake of some of the newer council members and maybe some of the other people that might be watching, could you give a Reader's Digest version of the difference between an EMT and a paramedic?
Real Cliff Notes version, how about that? That's even smaller than the Reader's Digest. Well, first of all, I can say that no, I guess I won't say the lowest, but the lowest certification that we accept at our department is a firefighter EMT currently. EMT is emergency, medical services. They can do basic first aid. They can do a lot more now than they used to, but a paramedic can basically give drugs. And that's the bottom line right there. It's to be able to give drugs. That, in essence alone, is kind of what separates the two in a very, very basic manner. And about 14 months of schooling, I guess. Nothing else for me? Fantastic, guys. If you do have questions, please do not hesitate at all to contact me, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. All right. Next on the agenda is council member term limits. This was added by Councilman Hermes.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is something that I had heard talked about with the discussion of the reduction of council members. It's come up in the past. And in this last discussion of that, our city attorney, Mr. Gatlin, weighed in on that, and I would like to ask Mr. Gatlin to kind of talk about that so everybody can hear.
Sure. So the short answer is we're not allowed to do term limits, and there's really two main reasons why not. One is KRS 83A040 subsection 4 sets the parameters for qualifications for council, and those qualifications are over 18 years of age and a resident of the city in which you're running in for over a year. That's about it. But because the legislature has spoken on the qualifications of council, they don't say in there and you can only run 2 times. There's also Section 160 of the Constitution that speaks of term limits as it relates to cities of the first or the former cities of the first and second class. So, yes, there are cities in our state that have term limits, but Section 160 of the Constitution specifically has those for the cities of the first and second class. So, I would say the entire municipal bar and KLC would interpret that in conjunction with KRS 83A, which sets out the qualifications, and Section 160 of the Constitution, which allows term limits for cities of the first and second class, that it's pretty explicit that no term limits are allowed for any other city for which Erlanger would be. I know the question always is, well, does home rule apply, right? Home rule is always that nebulous. Once we did away with the city classification system, now home rule allows cities to pretty much do everything. Well, the case law on that would say that home rule kicks in when there is not specific authority otherwise. So when there's ambiguity or when there's vagueness or when there's an opportunity to make a judgment call on an issue, home rule will protect a city. But in this particular case, I think it's very clear between Section 160 of the Constitution and KRS 83A040 that we are not allowed to do term limits, and the only way we could do term limits would be through some legislative action that they allowed and changed the rule. Now, what's interesting about this is about every 6 months, some city somewhere puts out on the KLC attorney listserv, hey, we're thinking about doing term limits. So it does seem like there are a lot of cities out there that are always looking at this issue and considering it. And, I think that's just something that, you all maybe need to reach out to the legislative body. I mean, they're in session here in January, and it's, it's going to take a legislative fix to allow term limits.
Thank you.
Any questions before we move on? Okay. All right. Next on the agenda is council member reduction. This was added to the agenda by Councilwoman Kyle.
Yes, and I hope you'll indulge with me. I just want to say a few things ahead of time. I personally didn't like the way that this legislation was added to the agenda. It's my own personal opinion. Our ordinance that we passed earlier this year specifically states that no legislation should be added to the agenda after 12 noon on Friday before the council meeting. And that's because a lot of us like to see what's coming up so we can get prepared and ask questions, etc. It also states that no legislation should be added to the agenda without being previously discussed at a caucus meeting. We ignored both stipulations of this ordinance, and my question is why? Why wasn't this legislation proposed during the summer when we could have done it properly, and according to the ordinance? Why did we wait until the last minute? And it makes us look like we're rushing this through. And my fear is a lot of citizens are going to be questioning this. And then I wanted to give you just a little bit of history of Erlanger. Probably most of you know this anyway. But anyway, the town of Erlanger came into existence in 1897. And Mr. Howard and I were in charge of the centennial in 1997. We had a big hoopla party. It was fantastic. But anyway, just to let you know how much we've grown, they did the first census in 1900, and we had 453 citizens. Now, from 1900 until 1950, we grew. We were at 3,694. And until 1949, we were ruled by a board of trustees. And then in 1949, they decided, well, let's do the mayor-council government. So they went with that. Obviously, they didn't have 12 members. I could never find out how many there were. I'd love to know. But then in 1958, the population just exploded. 91% it grew. So the council got together and said, hey, let's increase our numbers to 12 because our population is so big. Now we have almost 20,000 people in our city. We are the 4th largest city in northern Kentucky. Now, not all the large cities have that number of council. That's their problem, not mine. And my big thing about having 12 on council is diversity. I've always said that. and I think Ms. Riffle said the same thing when she spoke a couple weeks ago. Look at who we have here this evening. We've got 12 fantastic people. We've got business people. We've got health professionals. We've got educators. We've got lawyers. We've got financial professionals. And then we have people who work for the U.S. government in the postal system. So you've got a variety of experience here. Look at the people sitting here, the age group. All ages are represented. Look at where the people live. We live in all nooks and crannies of Erlanger. We're not all grouped together in one little group. We're over there, we're over here, we're there, we're everywhere, okay? We're well represented here, and I'd hate to see us lose that. Then, my other point is, in August, we had 8 people sign up or put in applications. They wanted to fill the vacancy on council. Now, granted, 2 of them dropped out, but we had 6 people, and most of those people, I won't say all of them, but most of those people really impressed me. And I just saw a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of willingness to serve. And I thought, man, this is, we need some of these people on here. And so if we say, let's go down to 9 or let's go down to 7, we're going to be limiting our numbers. We're going to be losing some of that diversity. I would hate to see that. I really do. And I know it's a pain sometime to work with 12 people, but, look at what we've got. Look at our city right now. My God, the mayor, she's got all the parks being fixed up. We got Stevenson Road finally going to be addressed. I mean, we're doing all the things that we've always wanted to do. And the city is really thriving right now. It's prosperous. Down the road, you may have a different mayor. You may have a different council. You could have people in one little group say, hey, we're going to do it this way. We don't want to fix the parks anymore. We don't want to do the roads. We don't want to. And that's what scares me. If you got 12 people, you got a little more protection. It takes 7 people to pass an ordinance the way we're geared right now. So that's my thoughts on that. I wrote things down so I wouldn't forget anything. But my thing is, what good reason do we have for reducing council? I'm not against it. I just want a good reason. If I have a good reason to do something, I'll do it. But right now, I'm not seeing a good reason. And then somebody said, well, we got relatives. Well, you know what? You go down to 7, all 7 of them could be related, and then what do you do? It's not protecting you from that. What if all 7 of them don't do the work that we expect them to do? That can happen too. Now you've got a couple people, and they're going to be working their little tails off because there's only 7 of you. Right now, we've got 12, so if somebody doesn't pull their weight, but look at our attendance. I mean, we're pretty good at attendance here, and our main job is to do the legislation and the budget. So I think we're very well equipped here right now. So I hate to see us lose that. Also, I did not get any phone calls or emails in the past couple weeks from anybody wanting to reduce council, but I did get quite a few calls, quite a few emails. They were all about protecting our 12. And I'm sorry, but I mean, I represent the people here, so I've got to kind of stick with them. So anyway, nobody asked me for a reduction in council. They all wanted to keep the 12. So now I'm going to open it up to the floor. I've said enough. Sorry, I didn't want to monopolize, but I had to speak my mind. Ms. Jasper. Lucas.
Thank you, Vicki. I also wrote down a whole lot of stuff because I didn't want to forget things, but I appreciate your sharing the history of Erlanger and how it grew, because I think that is very interesting to a lot of people, and I don't think a lot of people realize that it was really in the 50s when Erlanger kind of exploded. So I agree with a lot of the things that Ms. Kyle said. I do support the reduction from 12 to 9 and not 7 for several reasons. I also echo what Ms. Kyle stated about why was this added at the last minute. I also want to point out that it was on the caucus agenda for our last meeting, and then it was pulled, and I don't really understand why that happened. It was on there for us to discuss, and I was fine with that, and then it was tabled, and then it was quickly added back. So I don't really understand that. I do feel very strongly about the number needing to be an odd number. And that's one of the reasons that I'm supporting 9. 12 is a lot, and I did receive quite a few emails and phone calls from people that stated, I don't think you should reduce it. At the same time, a year ago when I was out campaigning, I consistently heard people say, you should reduce it. So I feel like the residents of Erlanger are pretty split on this, but what I consistently heard was it doesn't need to be reduced a lot. So I feel like 7 is too few for the city, a city the size of Erlanger. We need 9 to give more opportunity to have a diverse council, diverse in gender, race, residence location, economic background. 9 brings a variety of viewpoints. Some say that 7 will make it easier to agree, but I'm not sure that agreeing is always the goal. I think that more people brings a sense of healthy debate and viewpoints, and I think that's a good thing. We need 9 to do the work of our task forces. If we have 7, I'm not sure that we would be able to accomplish a lot of the things that we do with our task forces, and I feel like 9 is enough to accomplish those things. Edgewood is a city much smaller in population, budget, and staff size. They have 7. We're larger than Edgewood in terms of all these things, and the size of our city justifies 9. We consistently have at least 9 people receiving a large number of votes in the past 5 city council elections. I only looked at the past 10 years, which would be 5 elections, because that was the easiest and simplest to look at. Lowering the number to 9 makes the election a little bit more competitive, but still achieves a diverse representation. The number of votes cast per candidate shows me, and this is just my own analysis of the data, that voters are vetting all candidates contrary to what some people have said in the past about there being too many people to vet when you have a big council. I think our voters are paying attention to what candidates do and say, and their votes definitely reflect that. They are not simply voting for the first 12 on the ballot. The people at the top of the vote tally in the past 5 elections are the same people who regularly attend meetings, participate, work on task forces, talk to voters during election time, and are active in the community. So that's why I'm supporting 9, not 7. That's it.
Diana?
Thank you, Mrs. Kyle, Ms. Jasper Lucas. I agree with a lot of what you said. The reason I wanted to bring up and suggest 7 was I checked into all the counties and cities around here, and in this county and surrounding areas, the average is 3 to 7. So I thought if they can get by with 7 and it works in Florence, I think Erlanger can as well. In diversity, yes, we all should have a diverse council, but there's no guarantee for that. Who's to say next election, everybody on the new side of Erlanger will get elected, and everybody on the old side might get elected. There's no way of coming up with that unless we broke it down into districts or precincts and had a representative from each area. I mean, I just don't know how we can guarantee a diverse council, whether it's 12, 7, or 9. And as I walked door to door and stuff, meeting residents, and some I knew and some I didn't know, there was always 2 questions they asked. And one of the questions was the top of the list: why does Erlanger have 12 council members? And how do you get things done with 12 and everybody agree on something to move forward? Most of the residents, they gave me their feedback of between 6 and 7. I think 7 is a good number. That way you're not using the mayor as the tiebreaker and having it, people say the mayor is picking sides. So I like an odd number, and I think Erlanger could function just fine with 7. And I don't think it matters when you go to run if there's 7, 9, or 12. If you want to run for council, you're going to do your best no matter how many names are on that ballot and how many positions. And I think we're elected to represent the residents. And the ones I spoke with were requesting between 6 and 7. So that's why I'm proposing we go with 7 council members. Thank you.
Ms. Reckers?
Thank you, Mrs. Kyle. So when I presented or recommended 9 as part of the legislation in the last meeting, it came with a lot of data that I've reviewed and analyzed over the last year and a half. This is the 3rd time this has been presented since I was elected in 2018. So in doing so, I looked at the size of the government of any city in the entire Commonwealth over 10,000 residents. Their size of government, the amount of their employees, the community itself, whether it was a rural city, urban city, if it was a suburb of a large city like Louisville. We may be one of the largest governments in Northern Kentucky, if not the largest, but that's not necessarily how it looks downstate. So taking that full picture of all available data, that's how I arrived at 9. And after I spoke to a couple of mayors in the area and regional leaders, and they agree that council probably should be reduced. There was no number thrown out in those conversations. It was more of, well, I'm going to do some digging to make a fact-based decision with the number that I arrived at. In looking at some of the cities, yeah, there are some that have 12 people downstate, but they're also wards. It's unique cities that are not necessarily an apples-to-apples comparison with Erlanger. So I too, walking doors, had a lot of people ask me, why are there so many people? And it doesn't matter if we have 9 people or 12 people or 10 people on the ballot. There could be 25 people running. We've seen 25 people running, 24. So that doesn't make it any less candidates to vet, because people are going to run if they want to run. However, I will say, by making it a smaller council, whether it's, possibly 9 or even less, should that be the case, it could be cost prohibitive to run, because running a campaign with a smaller field is more expensive. So, I don't know how much people spent. I don't really care. I know how much I spent, and I know how much I would spend if the circumstances were different. So that's definitely something to take into consideration. You can't necessarily henpeck what part of town you want somebody, because we all ultimately represent everyone here in the city. We're elected by the people, for the people. That's what we're here for. It's the entire purpose of our governing body, but it can absolutely get cost prohibitive. And I know there's been additional talks about, well, we'll raise council pay if there's a smaller, we need to check one box at a time, because I'm certainly not here for the money. That is absolutely not why anyone should serve. And this should be for the right reasons. And you asked, what is a good reason? Well, I do think that council's too big. I have data to support it. She looked at averages, I looked at means, and I looked at the medians. It's 8.8 and 8.4. 8.8 is the average of any city over 10,000 that does not include Lexington and Louisville. I'm looking at you, Mr. Hermes, because I know you've got similar data in your dossier. So it is what it is. I looked at the median too. It's critical to look at both the mean and the median when you're looking at these cities. So that's why I personally arrived at it, and I stand by that. I'm happy to share my data that I have with anyone. Nobody really, I've had a couple people actually ask from the public and a couple from people from council, but not really anyone else has asked about, looking at it from the numbers. So, thank you.
Mr. Cahill?
So I actually like the 12, because I've been on here for a while looking at some of the things that we do. I think many hands make for light work, and our slow and steady approach has been very, very good to us. Our infrastructure is good now. Our finances are good based on the decisions of 12 people, 12 diverse ideas, 12 people discussing it out, making decisions. I did simple math. We have 19,611 people. We're representing 1,634 people for each council person. When you look at that, at Edgewood, it's 1,200 people, 1,249. You look at Ellesmere, it's 1,500 people per every council person. So more opportunities for discussion, more opportunities for people to have those discussions with a council person, either in their area, not in their area, at the grocery store, not at the grocery store, at the gas pump, wherever that could possibly be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cahill. Also, I was wondering if anybody looked at the square footage that we cover. That's another, did you? Okay, Gary.
Yeah, and that was actually, one of the things that I was looking at. I guess first, I do, when I was out knocking doors and things, that was one of the questions that I would hear that everybody else was saying that, why do you have so many? Let's, talk about reducing the number. I mean, I know I've been vocal about, supporting a reduction for a period of time. That was the one piece that I wanted to mention. We say, no, but not there, talk about cities our size. We can look at Independence, who has nearly 30,000 people. They have twice the land mass. Erlanger's about 8.25 square miles. Independence is 17.5 square miles. So much larger, much larger geography, much larger population, council size of 6. And when we back fire department out of the budget, because Independence has independent fire district, our budgets are really close, to the same. So I don't want to take that fallacy that because our city is this size, we got to have 12, because it's clearly successful in other places with smaller councils. That was the only piece that I wanted to mention, just because I know we were talking about some of those numbers and the size of the council where we're at now.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And I agree, I looked at Independence also, and you're right, they've got 29,000 and something. I didn't look at their square footage, though. You can see on the map, though, that it's pretty big. But thank you for that. Anybody else? Diana?
I have one more comment to make. I'm not sure if anybody was able to read the Northern Kentucky Tribune that came out today. There was some of us that had made comment in there about why we wanted to reduce the council members. There was a quote in there from Rebecca, council member Ms. Reckers. I think 9 members is a great stepping stone and definitely a step in the right direction. That makes me want to believe maybe you think down the road it should be 7, but you're taking little bitty steps at a time. Is that correct, Ms. Reckers?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that that's a false statement by any means, and I even told the reporter that yesterday. I don't want to, I think it would be an aggressive approach to cut to 7, particularly when walking doors and with the calls that I've been receiving and texts and emails, that it's just entirely too aggressive of an approach. I don't think it'd be a responsible decision on our part. So I think that 9 is a good number to work with, and potentially to cut down at another time to 7. But I think 7 at this time is just inappropriate.
Ms. Nice?
I think then again it can stem back to the right direction might be 7, as you're insinuating, correct?
I think the right direction is to reduce.
Okay, I saw Ms. Skidmore's,
Yes.
your hand up.
Yes, I did. Thank you, Mayor. I tried to look up where everybody lived to see how the representation went. And with the 12 council members, it looked like to me that 6 were on the east. Now I'm calling Turkey Foot. On the other side of Turkey Foot is the east side. Between Turkey Foot and Dixie Highway is the middle. And then from Dixie to on out to Houston Road would actually be the west side. So if I did my judgments correctly, there would still be 6 for the east side. There would be 2 in the middle, and then it would be 4 for the west side. So the 2 in the middle could actually go either way. And that doesn't mean that everybody in each precinct is going to vote the same. But I just really think that we need to, if it's not broke, it doesn't need fixed. We're not on the high end of the wages on council, and it's not about the money. It's about serving your community. And there's just other things to argue about besides kicking 2 or 3 people off a council because you want to make a statement. So if you're going to reduce it, I'd vote for 11, because then that would be an odd number and you'd never have a tie that needed broken. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Ms. Lucas?
Thank you. I wanted to make a comment about, I know that a lot of people, give people a hard time about, I live on the new side of Erlanger. I live in old Erlanger. I have lived in 3 different houses in Erlanger in my lifetime. I lived on Edgar Court for almost 18 years. 4 different houses, I apologize. We lived on McAlpin until I was 5. I lived on McAlpin. I lived on Edgar Court off of Riggs Avenue. I lived on Forest. That would all be considered old Erlanger. But now I'm labeled as I live in New Erlanger because I've lived in Sherborne for 2 years. So I just want to point out that just because where you live right now doesn't mean you don't have a different perspective on things. Because I feel like I am pretty good representative of all of Erlanger because not just because I've lived in different places, I also happen to go to Lloyd High School, but that doesn't make me different than somebody that went to St. Henry. So, or give, me a better viewpoint on Erlanger or anything like that. So, I guess it kind of bothers me that we continue focusing on where people live or where they have lived, and we all are elected by all the voters of Erlanger. And if we, unless we choose to have wards and only run in our certain precinct, I kind of feel like maybe we should leave that out of it a little bit. Other than the fact that I feel like having a larger number does create more opportunity for there to be a larger representation of different backgrounds. That's all.
Thank you. I think where I was coming from is like if we're in different locations, your neighbors kind of know you because they see you all the time and they'll say, oh, well, I'll ask her, she's on city council. I mean, I'm sure you all get the same that I do. Either phone calls or people coming knocking on your door or neighbors up the street if you're taking a walk. So that's where I was coming from. It's just that they have 12 people they can go to. The other thing is, too, we talk about the odd number, and I see that because I think even Mayor Fetty hates it when she has to break a tie. It puts a lot of weight on her. But even if you have an odd number, guess what? We're going to have people sick, people on vacation. So no matter what we do, I think we're all going to see the same thing. It's just that, I like the 12 because of the variety, and so that's why. But I wanted to clarify that with Ms. Lucas, that's why I said something about where we were from.
I'm not faulting anyone for saying it.
I know.
Yeah.
It's all right. Mr. Gassner. Mr. Hermes, I'm sorry.
I've been called a lot worse.
I know, he was principal of St. Henry's grade school. I don't know where that came from.
First, real quick on the last thing that you said, I agree as well. Like the odd and even number doesn't necessarily mean as much to me because we do have people that are absent for one reason or another, But I don't see a problem with the mayor voting on things. In fact, I think it's actually good. And if I'm someone that's sitting out there in the public and the mayor has to take a side on a vote, I think it's a good thing. It allows, it would allow me to know exactly where that person stands on a certain subject. And I like that. I like it personally if the mayor has to take a stand and break a tie. But I don't know how Mayor Fetty feels about that. Maybe I would have felt differently when I was mayor. I don't know. So I've also prepared a little bit to talk about here too. I'll start by saying I agree with Mrs. Kyle about the way that the legislation was introduced, but I certainly understand Mrs. Recker's rationale for adding it to the first reading to the last meeting. So that makes sense to me. So I'm in favor of 7 council members or fewer, not 9. While I would still prefer 9 over 12, I wouldn't be voting for that change because I don't believe the change is enough to make a substantive difference. Erlanger would still have the largest city council in northern Kentucky and larger than 226 of the 232 cities that I surveyed throughout the state of Kentucky. That's more than 97% of the cities that I looked at. And there was really no rhyme or reason to those cities that I surveyed. I just went city by city. There was large cities in there, there was small cities in there. Please bear with me. I'm going to tell a couple stories here of my experiences with our city government prior to getting involved. I'm also going to share some of my opinions. The topic, in my opinion, is too important and too complex for me to state this off the cuff. So I wrote this down to try to address every point. I'll warn you ahead of time, it's 4 pages long. So thank you in advance for your attention. But also, let me say one other thing. I've cut a few things out in the course of what we're talking about. There's no sense in me, repeating some of the things that have already been said. So the stream of this may sound a little disjointed at times. I'll apologize for that. So as many of you know, I was not born in Erlanger, nor did I grow up here. I knew of Erlanger because it had the biggest, best movie theater in the area, and for Marydale, where I went to summer camp as a kid. My wife and I chose to raise our family in Erlanger because we found a house with everything that we were looking for in a quiet neighborhood close to my work in Kenton County School District and a price we could afford. For the first 5 years I lived in Erlanger, I never had a single council member or mayor knock on my door to ask for my vote. They didn't need to, nor did they need to campaign. There was no competition for the positions. A vast majority of the elected officials had served for over a decade, and some of them had been in their position for almost 2 decades. Next, I remember reading an article about some concerned citizens who attended a city council meeting to look the mayor and city council in the eye when it came to a vote to raise the property tax rate. I don't remember all the details. I believe they expressed their opinion publicly. However, I distinctly remember this. The mayor referred to them as gargoyles. Now, how insulting is that? How diverse is that? Not a single council member or city staff member spoke otherwise or corrected the mayor. There was one dissenting vote for the tax increase from then Councilman James Brown, and I would like to think it was because of the people who spoke out. This made me begin to think that the mayor and the city council were doing a disservice to the people they were supposed to be representing. My next experience with our city government was when I came to speak about a relatively benign issue I wanted the city to address. They didn't address the issue or even pretend to try to help. Instead, my home was visited the next day by our code enforcement officers, and I received a letter stating that my trash can could be seen from the street, and if I didn't move it, I could receive a $100 fine. As I stood in my front yard and looked up and down the street, I could see 4 other people's trash cans. I went to those neighbors and asked if they received a similar letter. Excuse me. They all said no. I felt like I was being targeted because I had shown up at a city council meeting to speak out. That was the moment I decided I was going to get involved and make changes for the better to the way our city was operated. I began to attend every city council meeting. If I was going to run for an elected position, I wanted to make sure that I could make the time commitment. For over a year, I attended every meeting. Over that period, every single vote was unanimously approved. All yes ma'ams, never a no. It began to be clear that there was no diversity among the council, the mayor, the city attorney, or the city engineer. Never a dissenting vote. And no one ever expressed a contrary opinion. So as a sharp contrast to Mrs. Riffle's claim in the River City News, 12 council members did not guarantee there was diversity, diverse opinions, or even diverse eclectic nature. Instead, it appeared more so that it was a social gathering for some old friends here in the council chambers a couple times a month. A quick side note, at the time I was attending these meetings, there were 13 precincts in Erlanger. The 12 council members represented only 6 precincts in the city. So you see, 12 council members doesn't guarantee you will have an even distribution of representation across the city. There's nothing wrong with being friendly, respectful, and professional. But let me be clear, these meetings are to conduct the business of the people of Erlanger. Social gatherings are welcome outside of this room in groups less than a quorum. However, one of our council members has admitted publicly that this council used to meet at a local bar to discuss how everyone would vote prior to meeting to make sure things ran smoothly. Next is something I call the majority fallacy. I've heard people say it's easier to take over a majority of council if it's a smaller number of members. I've heard that argument swung around a bit. I don't seem to hear of those problems in other cities. If it could be the case, I'd like someone to cite a single city that is suffering from these problems. Surely there is some data. If there's any legitimacy to this argument. The sad fact is there is no data, and I'm afraid that's only fear-mongering. You know, as we've stated already this evening, the average number of council members throughout the state of Kentucky is between 5 and 6. So, you know, 12 council members is simply too many. The average citizen doesn't put enough time or doesn't put enough value on the position of the city council to vet 12 candidates. I still strongly believe that. In fact, if these 12 city council members knew how seldom the average city council or the average Erlanger citizen thought of them, they would probably walk around with their feelings hurt. But it's the truth. People value a half hour of their time doing household chores or watching TV more than they care about the people making the decisions on the behalf of almost 20,000 residents. The vast majority of people don't want to really know who these people are, what they stand for, or how hard they're willing to work. They know that the sheer size of council means that nothing too awful can happen no matter who is elected. Unfortunately, that also means that nothing too spectacular can happen either because of the sheer size of this council. Next thing I want to talk about is factions. A council size of 12 or maybe even 9 is large enough for factions to form. We've witnessed these factions and we'll continue to see it so long as council stays so large. James Madison talked about the dangers of factions in Federalist Paper number 10. A faction is a number of citizens, either a minority or a majority, that are united by a common impulse or passion adverse to the rights of other citizens or the best interest of the community. James Madison went on to say, the most powerful faction will control the government and make decisions based not on the common good, but to benefit itself. All other groups and the common good will suffer. We see two sides fight in these meetings frequently, as we have just said here recently. Lifelong residents versus newer residents, East versus West, old versus new Erlanger, old way versus new way, his idea or her idea. The basis of the argument becomes how many on your side instead of as they should, and that is which idea is the best for the people. With a council size of 7 or 6, factions are less likely to form. Now, politicians always seek a majority vote. That's different. Factions are building one side against another with the intent of destroying the other side, no matter what the consequence to the people or the staff. The city council campaign is a popularity contest. At 12 members, me personally, I have to exert very little to get reelected. At 9 members, I'm almost assured of a position. I promise now I'll run hard enough to make sure that I'm elected into a council of 9. At 7 members, I'm almost assured to lose the next election. That doesn't mean I won't work hard. I'm just admitting my being reelected is against the odds. My point is this: I want 7 members or fewer because it's the right thing for Erlanger, not because I'm trying to promote my own political career. So, walking door to door. When I ran for mayor in 2014, I visited almost 5,000 homes throughout the city I introduced myself, told them I was running for mayor. I received the same question from many of our residents. First, most popular, are you a Democrat or a Republican? Second most popular, why are there so many council members? Really? From there, people would respond, why do we have so many? And then they would say, you've got to reduce that number. There's a distinct advantage to a council member who shakes thousands of citizens' hands during the election cycle. They have to want the position. And they are faced with numerous challenges, questions, and situations. Fewer council members will help guarantee the candidates have got to get out there and press the flesh. Now, this ties back to my earlier story about moving to Erlanger and no mayor or council member ever knocking on my door. If these elected officials aren't out there pounding the pavement, how do they ever know what the thoughts, concerns, and desires of our populace are? The answer is they don't. And it is a large reason why several council members continue to fight this reduction on council size, because they haven't put themselves out there talking to large quantities of our citizens, because they don't have to get reelected on a 12-person council. Going door to door is a healthy thing for an elected official, as well as the constituents. It forces the candidates to stand on someone's doorstep and be faced with either praise or anger for the decisions of the body. It also forces those people to take a stand on the issue and make promises of what they will do if given the opportunity to serve. Competition for a seat on council is a good thing and a healthy decision for the city. The lower the number, the more competition. As Mrs. Kyle said, this does not guarantee the right candidates are elected in every election. However, it does help weed out bad members in multiple elections. If every council member knew they personally were going to be expected to walk and knock on 2,000 to 4,000 doors to be elected, several of them would have stopped running many years ago. I'll close with this. Due to the size of this council, most members have slipped into a state of mediocrity. Due to the size of this council, council members are able to hide behind the group and shirk blame for many bad decisions, shirk blame for any bad decisions onto others. Due to the size of this council, council members are able to shrug their shoulders at citizens' concerns and say it's someone else's fault. Due to the size of this council, council members are able to be elected on name recognition alone. That is why I support the reduction of this council to 7 members. I've watched the successes of this city over the last 7 years. I've also seen an unhealthy dose of turmoil. In most cases, the turmoil has been brought on by the large size of this council. But in every instance, the success has been won due to the Herculean effort of a seldom few committed individuals. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Hermes. I don't know who had their hand up first. Ms. Reckers?
Thank you, Mr. Hermes. I feel like I just lived through your 2014 mayoral speech, but I just want to say that shaking hands doesn't necessarily make you a good legislator or a good council member. And for anyone who is interested in running for council, you do not have to have the physical fitness to be able to walk 5,000 doors to get your name out there. Do not be discouraged by that. You know, I take pride when I go door to door, but it's not necessarily because I want the votes. It's because as a council member, I want to meet my residents. I want to get out there and meet them. So it's important to me to do that, regardless of what the initiative is. And I have one more comment to Mr. Hermes' research, and I appreciate you doing your own research, Mr. Hermes, but the reason that I looked at only 10,000 population or more is Cities like Ryland Heights, they're amazing. They're here in Kenton County. They have 1,000 residents and they have a 6-person council. So it is completely not an apples to orange. It's an apples to oranges comparison. Independence doesn't have the business infrastructure that we have. They don't have nearly the same size of government we have besides the fire, even including the fire district. I don't even think those numbers are included in their government size because it's county. I'm almost positive on that, the fire district. Nevertheless, all of those factors were taken into consideration, but it's important to take into consideration the larger cities. So we should take pride in the fact that we're the 20th largest city in the state. Is that 19th largest city in the state? We should take pride in that. We shouldn't say, well, that makes our council bigger than 97%. Yeah, because we're 19th in order. That's how it works when 20,000 people live here. So just wanted to give my 2 cents on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lucas?
Did you want to respond to anything she said before I say anything? Okay, go ahead.
I think it's really nice, Mrs. Reckers, that you go out and you talk to people, going door to door to get to know them rather than get elected. I would just be curious, how many times have you done that since the last election?
Do you want to keep tabs on me, Mr. Hermes, or why do you ask?
Well, I think if you boil it down, it's to get reelected.
Well, I definitely have talked to people in the community about chickens, about reduction in council, about taxes, about the budget, dog parks. What else have we talked about this year, guys? All kinds of things.
Ms. Jasper Lucas.
Thank you. Several questions for Mr. Hermes, and then I'll share some of my opinions about some things you said as well. I'm just curious what years you're referring to that you first moved to Erlanger, that you state that no one knocked on your door. Doesn't mean they didn't knock on any door. They didn't knock on your door. So I'm curious to know what years those were that because you just named one council person during that time. So I'm just trying to get a reference of time. I hope that the citizens of Erlanger heard you say that they're stupid. And I hope that they are as offended as I am by that, because you said they don't take the time to vet the candidates. That disgusts me, that you would call the citizens of Erlanger and say that about them as a council member. So that's my opinion. I'm going to share it. I also want to know if the factions you referred to include any of the people that maybe had 5 signs in one person's yard, because I see that faction at work a lot. And I personally take offense at you saying that most of the people up here have slipped into mediocrity. I see a lot of people here that work their butts off to do a lot of work in the city. And for you to sit there and say that they've slipped into mediocrity should be offensive to all of us.
Well, I'm glad you do take offense, and I hope you do continue to. There was one of the, I do not call the people of Erlanger stupid. What I'm talking about is based on data and numbers, and the people of Erlanger just don't vote for 12 people, which tells me why would they not vote for 12 if they vet 12? So the average person in Erlanger votes for 6.46 people in an election. And if 12 is the right number, then people should vote for 12, and people would vote for 12.
It's because they can read.
That's my opinion.
It's because they can
And I'm
read.
allowed
It
it.
says up to 12 on the ballot.
Yeah, just
They
because
can read.
Okay.
I personally
They
think
know the assignment.
One person at a time, please.
I personally feel like not voting for 12 actually means they vetted all of them. Because if somebody didn't know what they were doing, they probably would just check 12 boxes. They know what they're doing. And they're not voting for certain people. they vetted them all.
I know there's no way of, I mean, this is conjecture on my point, but I can assure you that if there's 7 names on the ballot, there's the percentage of people that someone votes for is not going to go down. They're probably going to vote for more. They're probably going to vote for all 7.
So they do or do not know how to count to 7? Because on the ballot, it's going to say up to whatever that number is. I'm just wanting to make sure that that's what you're implying. Our residents know how to read, and they vote for up to 12, and they choose not to in many cases. Many people on this council and their spouses bullet vote. We all know that.
I'd be happy to show you the numbers.
Okay, is there anybody else that wants to speak?
I just want to thank everybody. And you can see from the conversations that we've had tonight, we're all really heart and soul into this. Mr. Skidmore.
There we go. Thanks, Vicki. I'm forward to keeping it at 12. I think the way the city is growing, that we don't have to make any changes. Council is growing, you know, everything's going to be working together to keep up with the growth of the city. These people that think that they can go out there and knock on doors and that's going to be the answer to their campaign, I disagree with that, because we've had several people that has run for council that's knocked on doors and didn't make it. That's not the answer. A lot of people don't want to be bothered. They just soon look out the window and read a sign and you go on down the street. They done got their mind made up as to who they're going to vote for. And they don't like to come to the door on a Saturday morning in their pajamas to talk to somebody. So, you know, I never went door to door to bother anybody. I put my campaign signs out, and that's the way we drove around town with magnets on our cars, and we didn't bother anybody. And I think that was pretty professional on our part, because like I said, a lot of people has their own life on the weekends, and they don't want to be standing at the door talking to somebody. If they've got a problem, they'll get a hold of a council person, or they'll come to a council meeting. But I think 12 is the answer. It's always been the answer, and I still haven't figured out why there is a reason it wants to be cut. So I just, and to try to drag out some of the old history of some of the other people that's been on council, that's just in the past and should be never, you know, held over our head. So I just don't feel like a reduction is something that needs to be done. So that's just the way I feel about it. So thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Skidmore. Yeah, I tend to agree with some of what he's saying. I know, I won't mention names, but I do know some people who really knocked themselves out going door to door. God love them. I mean, they had little kids with them, and they went door to door, and they did not get elected. And it's like, oh my gosh, you know, you just feel so sorry for them. They did everything they had to do. But with this, I can see we got lots of different ideas, and I respect everybody's idea. I mean, I think we all have to follow our heart and do what we think is best for Erlanger. You know, so, Ms. Nicely.
I have one last comment. I think we all have to realize, no matter what age group we fall in, that change is good. Change is good. And we all face change in the corporate world, in city, and on council. And I think we can't just sit there and let things go the way they were. I think change is good.
Change is good if we have a reason. And, you know, that's I taught a lot of young people, so I think I stayed young at heart because of that, and I still keep in touch with them. But, yeah, I mean, I am willing to change, no doubt. It doesn't matter how old I get. My husband is amazed at how I fly around on the computer. And since I can't fly around on my legs anymore, that's how I contact a lot of people. I mean, I get a lot of emails, a lot of personal messages, Facebook. I keep in touch with a lot of our citizens that way, and God love them, they keep in touch with me too. So, I agree with Mr. Skidmore. I personally do not like people coming at my door. We actually have a symbol on our door that says we've already got our religion. If you're selling it, we've already got it. We don't want any political people come. It sounds horrible, but we live in a bi-level. I got to go down a whole flight of steps, and I have to do one step at a time. It just takes me forever. So some of the older people probably don't like to be pestered. It's probably the younger generation that likes to, have people come to their door. But I welcome any citizen comments, and like I said, I have to do it on computer.
All right, I believe this concludes the conversation. We'll go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda, chickens. Councilwoman Jasper Lucas.
I just had some additional questions about chickens. I don't necessarily want to lead the conversation about it. I feel like Councilman Doan is probably much more appropriate to lead the conversation, but I do have some additional questions and comments, and then I know Ms. Kyle does as well. So just a few things these are things that I thought of and other residents brought up to me. I have a concern about chickens and foxes. And I personally had an entire family of foxes that lived behind my house when I lived on Forest, in a very dense, populated street. And I'm a little bit concerned about the foxes and the chickens and not getting along. So that's just mostly a comment, not necessarily a question. I did reach out to codes, and I know this has been brought up by a few different people. I reached out to codes enforcement and asked them if they felt like this would be a burden to them to enforce it, and I had a lot of residents ask me that as well. So that's why I felt like it was important to ask. And codes said they did not feel like this would be a burden to them, if anybody else had that same question. And my next question is, if a dog kills a chicken, who's liable? Do you want me to ask all my questions first and then? Okay. The next one is if a chicken gets out and messes up somebody else's yard, who's liable? Finally, I know that the ordinance says it uses the terms unclean and unsanitary. I feel like everybody kind of has a different idea of what that means. I could eat off my grandma's floor. She can't eat off mine. I think my house is clean. She thinks her house is clean. So we have a different definition of sanitary. So I feel like we need a little bit more clarity on that, because I feel like it could be vague, and different people are going to have a different opinion about that. And I would hate for somebody to get cited because their coop was unclean or unsanitary, and they said, I thought it was fine. So those are my comments/questions.
Sure. So I'll start at the top. Chickens and foxes. I think that's goes with the age-old saying, don't let the fox in the hen coop there. And I think part of that is we've decided in our ordinance that you're required to have a coop that keeps the chickens enclosed. I don't know that we're going to be able to play God here and prevent foxes from doing what they naturally do. And I don't know what the fox population in Erlanger is either. But I would imagine that that's something that a chicken owner is going to need to be aware of and to address that issue. I'm going to skip over the codes section. It seemed that you thought that it wouldn't be a burden, and that's kind of what I've been hearing as well. If a dog kills a chicken, or if a chicken is out and messes up somebody's yard, that's not in my bailiwick of the practice of law. So I'll kind of defer, but I would tell you that it would seem like if you're responsible for maintaining that animal, there may be some comparative fault for those individuals. And if the chicken gets out, it would seem that would be, the responsibility of the person that is in charge of their pet or their, mode of food. And then unclean and unsanitary, I think that would just be up to code enforcement to kind of set a standard as to what they believe is unclean and unsanitary.
Okay, I guess I'm next. Okay, and as you all know, I've raised chickens before. I had a farm. I had a horse, ducks, chickens. I had it all. But anyway, My thing is, homeowners associations will not let you have chickens, and there is a reason for that. And I wish I belonged to a homeowners association right now, because a lot of people are resentful, telling me, well, how come we have to have chickens and they don't? And I said, well, that's just the way it is. You know, we don't belong to the homeowners. I jotted some things down that people told me. Some people are afraid it's going to lower their home values. I do know for a fact that chicken feed and manure can attract unhealthy critters, possums, and I know we've got possums and stuff, but what I'm saying is they're going to get into that chicken coop. Trust me, they will. The only reason they didn't on the farm is because I had dogs and cats who kind of patrolled the area. But also, people we're going to have to consider that chickens can freeze very easily in the winter if you don't have appropriate accommodations. Of course, that's not our problem. That's the person that buys the chickens. But I did know that every chicken needs 3 square feet of coop room and 3 square feet of run room. So what is that, 36 square feet per chicken, and we're allowing 6, and plus it has to be 50 feet from the nearest house. So that's going to be pretty restrictive. They do need to move around, you know. But then what else do we have here? Some people were afraid of the odors, and I know our chicken coop was way far from the house. And people were afraid that when they go in their backyards, they were not going to be able to enjoy picnics and cookouts. What else have they told me? Chicken eggs can infect you with salmonella. You have to be very careful, wash your hands, wash the eggs, all that kind of stuff. Since they've got them in a coop, that's a good deal, because if they're running loose, you don't know how long those eggs have been there. Let's see. The other thing I have a concern about is normally when we do ordinances, citizens come and address council and say, hey, we would like to blah, blah, blah. Like when Miss Fetty championed the lady, I forget where she lived, but she wanted chickens, and she came up and she addressed council. We did not have anybody address us at any meetings prior to or during the first reading. So I was kind of surprised at that. And then you did say that only 4 people approached you, and I'm like, why are we making an ordinance for just 4 people? That's my other question. I think that is it. And again, I mean, people have contacted me about it. They saw it on my Facebook page. I put it on there, and they private messaged me and called me and told me, they said, we don't want chickens. So that's my, that's my bit. That's it.
I appreciate that. No, you know, and I think I'll kind of start at the top, you know, with respect to the HOA issue. If we allow it here for everyone, then that gives someone with an HOA an opportunity to go to their HOA and to amend that and change that if that's something that they want. You know, my brother-in-law lives in Sherborne, and we talked about this on Sunday, and he said that he would like to put chickens in his backyard. He'd get rid of the kids' swing set and put some chickens down there, but he can't do it because of the HOA. So, you know, it opens up an opportunity for people to be more involved in what can sometimes be the tyranny of an HOA and get those things changed if they want. A lot of the issues I feel that you brought up are issues that owners of chickens need to be aware of. And I thank you for bringing that up, because people shouldn't just own chickens. They shouldn't just have chickens. They should educate themselves, they should be responsible, and they should make sure that they're doing what's in the best interest of those chickens. You know, having worked in agriculture, so often farmers are blamed for a lot of the problems. You know, animal rights people come out and they say, you know, these farmers abuse their cattle. It's not it at all. If you actually have those animals, if you raise those animals, you come to love them, you care about them, and ultimately that's the product that you're putting on a shelf. So you're going to want to treat that well. And I apply that to chickens because, you know, you're going to eat the eggs that come from there. You brought up salmonella. Well, you know, you're not going to die from it likely, but you're going to learn proper handling if you make a mistake. And so, again, I would go back to education. I would go back to making sure that what you're doing before you do it, you know. With respect to the odors, I think that we've kind of addressed that issue. You know, I would leave it up to code enforcement to kind of say, you know, what that is. In terms of people, you know, only 4 people reaching out to me, I've had 0 people reach out to me individually about this since the first reading. And I think, and I credit that not to me being out there, but to me being new. A lot of people just don't know who I am. They just haven't had an opportunity. In fact, 2 people are here who are supportive of chickens. One of them I did meet prior to, and I can't think of your name, the lady in the back. You came and spoke at the first reading. Yep, you came and spoke at the first reading. And so, there is interest, certainly more people here that have spoken to me about it than people that have spoke against me about it who are citizens and not council members. Did I miss anything?
No, but I got to share a story with you. One time I went out to my coop, and we had a big run, and there was a giant snake. He was caught in the chicken wire. I had to take a shotgun, and of course I destroyed part of my fence and had to replace that. But I mean, those are things people need to think about. I mean, you're going to have, predators come in your yard, and they can tear that chicken wire. I mean, I don't know how strong you're going to build your chicken coop, but it better be pretty strong because they're pretty crafty. They can get in there. So, that's all.
I've got a friend that owns chickens in downtown Cincinnati, and so I understand it completely. She's a new mother with a kid, and I think they have maybe 5 or 6 chickens. It's nice for them, They're just doing it for the eggs. But certainly, and if there's any citizen out there that's interested in doing chickens, I wouldn't tell you to just go do it. I would tell you to go talk to Cooperative Extension, reach out to some of these online groups. As this is becoming continually more popular nationwide, you're seeing food shortages, you're seeing egg shortages. These things are going to continue to go on. We're here and talk, we might not even have Christmas. The White House is directly addressing that issue. So we're going to see supply chain shorten up, and if you want to have eggs and you want to have a supply of chicken for yourself and provide for yourself, certainly go out, do your research, and don't just put chickens in your yard to have chickens in your yard. Really look into it.
And also keep in mind, it's more expensive to raise the chickens than it would be to buy your eggs. I don't know if you all know that, but I found that out when I bought the chicken feed. That's another thing to consider. So, I mean, if they're considering finances.
Okay. Any other questions, comments before we move on? Okay. All right, the last item on the agenda is the KCPC representative and the BOA appointments. You received a bio. I'm trying to pull mine up here. So our previous representative of the KCPC, Jeremy Armbruster, he had previously been on the BOA. He had requested to go back to the BOA due to time restrictions in his current role within his company. So I would like to ask you to oblige his request. And Dan McElhaney is a longtime resident of the city of Erlanger. You've all received his bio. He has previously run for city council, even though it does not say this on here. So he definitely stays up to speed with what's going on in the city. He wants to be involved. He has a desire to serve. And I would ask that you approve my appointment of Dan McElhaney to KCPC representative and Jeremy Armbruster back to the BOA. Yes.
I just have a quick question. In reading Mr. McElhaney's bio, and since you mentioned that Mr. Armbruster didn't have the time to commit, and I completely understand that, I'm not questioning or holding anything against anybody. I am a little bit concerned that Mr. McElhaney might not have time since he owns 3 businesses. I feel like these positions, I feel like we need to ask if they have the time to commit, because they're not elected. So, we don't have the opportunity to ask them questions about things. And this is really our only opportunity to ask anything about them. But I feel like especially Planning Commission needs to be somebody that's going to be consistent and going to be able to make that commitment to attend those meetings and long term and not just for a short period of time. So that's my only question is, does Mr. McElhaney feel like he can commit to that? And then I will ask the same question of Mr. Armbruster as well. I respect, that you have to make decisions and things get busy at work. But I just would want to make sure that he felt like, I know the Board of Adjustments is not as big of a commitment. So I understand that. That's my only question.
Yeah, and I definitely had that conversation with Dan to make sure that he understood the time commitment associated with it, especially since I had heard some information back from Mr. Armbruster. So he is fully understanding of the situation and fully willing to make that commitment. Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right, we'll go ahead and conclude the city council.
I had one other comment, and I forgot to ask for this to be added to the agenda. Doesn't really need to be on the agenda. I just wanted to thank everybody for considering the rent assistance proposal. Mr. Kramer and I talked about it. He did quite a bit of research, and I really appreciate him reaching out to several other cities. It was recommended that we not pursue that by our auditor and Mr. Kramer based on the research that he did and that he found out from other cities as far as the time commitment. There also were several other reasons. Mr. Meyer referred to several of them in our last caucus meeting and commented on that there are other funds that are still readily available to these people, for the need to be met. And so due to all of those things, we will not be pursuing that. But I just wanted to mention that, and I appreciate you all entertaining the idea. That's all. Sorry.
Thank you for the update. And I appreciate all the work that you put into that. I really do appreciate it. To be able to put the PowerPoint presentation, it really shows how much effort you put into it, and I appreciate it.
One thing I will hope that people remember from that PowerPoint presentation that was really kind of eye-opening to me is how much our residents are spending on housing and how much rental property we have in Erlanger. I had multiple people come up to me after that presentation and say, I had no idea some people were spending that much on housing, of a percentage of their income, and how much rental property we have in Erlanger. So if nothing else comes of that, just that we have a different perspective on some of our residents and understanding of where they are.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, before we get into the special meeting, I sent out to council the 22 budget amendment has been changed. We recommend it be changed to a first reading. That's due to us receiving insurance payment for a tractor that caught fire over a weekend a few months ago at Public Works, burnt up the tractor, did some decent damage to the garage. We did receive the payment for both of those, but the tractor is not in the budget. So we just, instead of doing a budget amendment next month, we just went ahead and did a first reading. So I don't know if anybody had any questions on that. I sent you a memo and everything, but I wanted to bring that up before we have the first reading again. Sorry about that change.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and conclude the City Council caucus meeting, and I'll go ahead and call to order the special meeting of the City Council. Mrs. Hoffman, if you can please take roll.
Ms. Elmore?
Present.
Mr. Cahill?
Present.
Ms. Kyle?
Present.
Mr. Skidmore?
Present.
Mr. Hermes?
Here?
Mr. Doan?
Present.
Mr. Meyer?
Present.
Ms. Skidmore? Ms. Nicely?
Present.
Mr. Nipper?
Present.
Ms. Reckers?
Present.
Ms. Jasper Lucas?
Present.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. Jack?
This is an ordinance of the City of Erlanger in Kenton County, Kentucky, amending Erlanger ordinance numbers 2498, 2512, 2513, 2518, and 2521, and the budget adopted thereby for the City of Erlanger for the fiscal year beginning on July 1, 2020, and ending on June 30th, 2021. Attached is the Google Docs / Excel spreadsheet. What has been struck through is what is being amended, and next to it you will see the columns as to what the new amended amounts were for the Budget Amendment 5. This is a second reading.
Okay, do I entertain a motion that we adopt this ordinance as read? Mrs. Reckers, Mr. Nipper? Any discussion? Oh, Gary?
Yes, Mayor, I just wanted to just make a couple comments real quick. I know I had voiced some concerns about, this budget amendment before. I still don't think, that I think what we're doing with the next first reading is the appropriate way to do things. I don't think that by passing this budget amendment, it necessarily, does what is intended. And I wanted to read two pieces of items. One is from, it's KRS 91A030, Section 13. And that says, no city agency or member, director, officer, or employee of a city agency may bind the city in any way to any extent the amount of money at that time appropriated for the purpose of that agency. And further, it states all contracts, agreements, and obligations expressed or implied beyond existing appropriations are void, nor shall any city officer issue any bond, certificate, or warrant for the payment of money by the city in any way to the extent beyond the unexpected balance of any appropriation made for that purpose. I know the second piece I'm going to read is from KLC. I know I harp on the budget a lot, but I think this is the one area where council really needs to hold, the administration accountable for spending and making sure that we're only spending the things that this council has approved on. And what I'm reading is from the KLC manual. For anybody that's referencing, this is an old version, but it's Chapter 19, and I've seen it in other versions as well. In Chapter 19, Section C, it'll say, it is a common practice in many cities to expend funds in excess of amounts appropriated to a particular budgetary fund or to transfer monies from one fund to another fund and then amend the budget at year end to reflect that this was done. Technically, this practice is illegal since KRS 91A031 states that, the piece that I just read. It also gives, references to remediation and some effects of noncompliance with those pieces. But I just wanted to make sure that I, read that again and just kind of state that I don't think this is the appropriate way for us to do the budget, nor do I think it actually is doing what's intended, and 4 months later approving money that was already spent. At some point, we have to be able to hold accountable to a budget. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, roll call vote.
Ms. Skidmore? Ms. Kyle?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Jasper Lucas?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Nipper?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Doan?
Aye.
Ms. Nicely?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Meyer?
No, ma'am.
Ms. Reckers?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Elmore?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Skidmore?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hermes?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Cahill?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, motion carried.
All right, next we have an ordinance of the City of Erlanger in Kenton County, Kentucky, amending Erlanger Ordinance Number 2522 and the budget adopted thereby for the City of Erlanger for the fiscal year beginning on July 1, 2021 and ending on June 30th, 2022. Again, attached, you can see what is being amended, has been struck through, and the new amounts is what is next to those strike-throughs. This is just a first reading.
Okay, Mrs. Hoffman, please note the minutes of the first reading, please.
Next, we have a municipal order of the City Council of the City of Erlanger in Kenton County, Kentucky, approving the appointment of Dan McElhenney as a member of the Kenton County Planning Commission to fill the vacancy therein resulting from the resignation of Jeremy Armbruster. This will be for a term beginning October 19th, 2021 and continuing until December 31st, 2024. This does require a motion and vote.
Okay, Mrs. Reckers? Mrs. Nicely? Any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carried.
Next, we have a municipal order of the City of Erlanger in Kenton County, Kentucky, approving the appointment of Jeremy Armbruster as a member of the Board of Adjustment for the City of Erlanger to fill a vacancy therein resulting from the resignation of Amanda Peters. This would be a term continuing until the first Monday in January of 2022.
Okay, do I entertain a motion that we adopt? Mr. Hermes, Mrs. Kyle, any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carried. All right, do I entertain a motion that we adjourn? Mr. Nipper, Mrs. Nicely, any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Have a good